Good afternoon and welcome to this Eurocities City Dialogue on Culture, focusing on European cities responding to the COVID crisis. I'm Julie Hervé. I'm a senior policy advisor in charge of culture, and I work at the Eurocities office in Brussels. Today, we are going to discuss common city challenges and share inspiring solutions. We have on our agenda Anna Lisa Boni, the Eurocities Secretary General, and then Justine Simons, the Deputy Mayor of London in charge of culture and the creative industries, Araf Aramadi, a Senior Policy Advisor for the Arts and Culture from Amsterdam. We also have with us Maciej Goffman from the European Commission, and Susanna Tomila from the city of Espoo, who is chairing the Eurocities Culture Forum. We have connected with us at the moment around 90 persons from 68 different cities, so it's really nice to see you, if I may say, online, and see that the Eurocities Culture Forum family can be together, even not physical.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really happy to join today's Culture Forum event. It's really great to see how digital tools are actually helping us to keep the network together, and in this case also support you in facing this terrible crisis. It's true that, the COVID-19 pandemic has clearly turned all our lives upside down. And you as local authorities are experiencing the impact so much, to such a big extent. So that's why Eurocities has decided to mobilize the whole team and the whole network to help you learn from each other and deal with this crisis in the most effective way. So how do we do that? We do it through policy activities and visibility activities, like for instance, early April. So at the beginning of the crisis and the lockdowns, Eurocities produced a statement, a political statement on the crisis, to really, say to EU leaders, national leaders, that it's important to have European solidarity and solidarity across all levels of governance, because we need to fight this virus all together, but also we need to think of a recovery and of a long-term impact all together as well, not only the emergency. So that's one strand, but we're also doing a lot of networking activities, and this today's Cities Dialogue is exactly an example. So we are doing city-to-city exchanges online on different themes, but also through forums and working groups that are all doing activities online and so on. So that's a very important part that, as I said before, tries to keep the network all together. And finally, through also EU-funded projects. And, for you as a community specifically interested in culture, I'm thinking, for instance, of the Cultural Heritage in Action initiative that we get funded by the European Commission, and it's really interesting because it's proposing an EU peer learning program for cities and regions on cultural heritage. So yeah, these are the three ways in which we're trying to help you. It's true that during confinement times, we're all turning to culture, reading books, watching movies, watching theatre plays online, visiting museum online. All these things have become essential features in our daily life. So I even would like to say that they even help us to survive these difficult times. Having said that, it's really clear that the culture and creative sectors are among the most affected sectors by this crisis. If you look at the estimates by Eurostat, recent ones, the COVID-19 crisis may affect I think about 7.3 million cultural and creative jobs across the EU. This is terrible, and it raises a huge number of issues and concerns. So that's why I'm particularly pleased that many of you are here today, gathered to exchange on cultural measures at your level, at the city level, and hopefully be useful to respond to the crisis and see how these lessons that can be learned can be productive and useful for more people and more cities across Europe. So yeah, I look forward to seeing you soon. Who knows when, but we hope soon. Thank you everyone for being here and for staying tuned with Eurocities. Thank you to the team for having organized the event, and I wish you an inspiring discussion. Thank you very much.
By artists and freelance creative practitioners, and many of the cities are for the first time designing direct aid for individuals. But this is challenging because city relationships don't usually work that way. Normally, as cities, our funding is channeled through institutions, but we know that the people we really need to reach, we are having to go directly to them. So that's an interesting challenge for us. Number 8, cultural tourism. Global tourism has pretty much collapsed, and lots of our cities are now focusing their phase 1 tourism recovery strategies on local tourism, on domestic tourism, as they begin to rebuild. And of course, this doesn't bring with it the economic benefits of people booking hotels, but at the moment, it is the first stage, getting people from our local communities back into the local economy and boosting cultural tourism. Theme 9 is the money, philanthropy. We've talked a lot about how we can work differently and more strategically with funding partners. An opportunity for new strategic relationships with philanthropy and combined efforts between philanthropy and city governments. We've heard from philanthropists what they need from us as city governments. And then finally, theme 10 is reform in recovery. So this is really all cities not wanting to lose the opportunity to reform. Where are the chances that we can reinvent, we can rethink, and we can address some of those systemic issues? So they're the top themes. There's lots of inspiring examples coming through cities, and I'm happy to talk about, but perhaps I'll stop there.
Okay, that's a very long list of common and shared challenges through world cities. I'm sure all the European cities that are there are sharing them. Yes, I was just about to ask you to move a little bit. Now we really see you perfectly. Yes, that's great. How is the local situation? What is the context in London? Is everything still closed, or are you starting reopening step by step?
We're starting gradually, I mean, the local situation is, as has been said, it's been catastrophic in the UK, and particularly for the culture and the creative industries. We were hit first, we were hit hard, and we will be hit longest. So there are tentative steps in terms of reopening, but there is a lot of concern in London about this because we don't have the testing capability nationally. So, for example, theatres are, not, the message coming through from theatres is they won't be able to open until there's a vaccine, in the absence of decent testing. So we've got some quite significant challenges. In London, the creative economy is worth about 52 billion a year, and there's another 40 billion in the supply chains. 1 in 6 jobs in London is a creative one, and it's a very fragile network. It's 99.9% small businesses, 50% freelancers, and we've got some government support for employee costs, but it's not going to stretch far enough. So we are seeing that freelancers and individual creative practitioners have been the hardest hit, and also grassroots venues, small music venues, LGBT plus clubs, all of those really kind of grassroots, smaller institutions we've been focusing on, because they've been really hit super hard.
Yes, I see that we are starting receiving questions for you on the chat box that you have on your screen. So please use this chat box as a question box, and my colleague Cécile will take the questions and will ask them to Justine after our small chat right now. You said the creative industries account for 1 in 6 jobs in London. I heard that a new specific support fund had been launched very recently. Do you want to share a little bit more about it, Justine?
Yeah, I mean, just to give a bit of context, London is different to many European cities in that as a city we're very young. We've only had a mayor of London since 2000. And so we don't own or directly fund a lot of cultural buildings. So really we're looking at where we can add real value to what's already happening. And so, you know, our essay question is how can we best deploy our platform, our convening power, our voice, and how can we encourage more strategic working with other people's money in a way, you know, how can we convene and bring people together? So one of the things we've been really tracking is the grassroots culture, and that's been very hard hit. And we have already established a culture at risk office, which is, I describe it as the bat phone in the Batman films, where you can pick up the phone and get help and advice. And we've supersized this for COVID, so we've redeployed a lot of people into it. And in the last few weeks since COVID, we've had, I think, 400 case requests in London, and that is more than we've had in the entire 4 years we've run it so far. So there's lots of demand for small cultural businesses, all cultural businesses, for support. And we expect more and more urgent calls as people get turned down for hardship funds and the economic impact of COVID starts to really hit. I'd say the other thing that we've done recently is we've launched a fund. It's £2.3 million, and it's money for those grassroots organisations. So in London there are 25 independent cinemas. There's money for them. There's money for small grassroots music venues, and you know, small LGBT clubs, etc., and artist studios as well. They've been hard hit. So that's what we've been up to. The other few things we're doing a lot of convening, a lot of round tables, bringing people together to really get under the skin of what we can do to help and how we can help each other, on freelancers, on music venues, on clubs, on unlocking, on all manner of different things. Yeah, so we're just trying to kind of, you know, be as useful and supportive as we can, and we're also doing a lot of lobbying to national government, because what we see is that our national government, there are gaps in the safety net in what national government knows and is providing for our sector. So we are also being the voice on behalf of culture in London.
Justine, we don't see you anymore. We hear you very well. What do you think will be the priority actions in the following months, or what do you consider will be the most urgent needs for London in terms of culture, creative sector?
Can you see me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I can't see myself. I'm used to kind of. That's why my camera is all over the place. What's next? I would say 5 things. One, we really desperately need a national recovery package. You know, the Mayor of London, as I've said, is not the major funder for culture. And this is a national crisis, and we are really needing our government to match some of the other governments that have put together specific packages for the creative economy. So we really need to see some national support, I think. Number 2, I think a kind of recognition that this is a long road, that you know, we have all pivoted into the immediate response, but in the long term, we'll need much more than that. I think what we've got now is a kind of sticking plaster, and we've got to move into a more long-term support. I think number 3 is a well-planned reopening of culture. Venues can't open overnight, and we are really keen for our government to publish an exit strategy and some very sector-specific health and safety advice. We're doing what we can in London to inform that, but that in the UK that has to come from national government. So we want well-planned reopening. Number 4, yeah, we need support for those at the end of that recovery period. So theatres, I mentioned, are in a particularly difficult position because they rely so heavily on people coming together in a small space, and their business models won't support 50% opening, 30% capacity. So we've got to think very carefully about the people who are at the end of the recovery and the end of the opening. And then, as I mentioned before, reform, we've got a list of things we really, really want to fix. We want to do better at supporting artists. We want working conditions for freelancers to improve. We want tax breaks for philanthropy to make it easier for people to give to culture. You know, and as we move into a 24-hour city, we want to look at how, for example, through unlocking, we can accelerate London's move into a 24-hour city. You know, can people work on a different timeline to allow social distancing under the model of a 24-hour city? So I would say these are the things that are on our minds.
Yeah, sounds really good. We're collecting questions in the chat, so I suggest that I give the floor to my colleague Cécile. Cécile, can you sum up a little bit the questions for Justine?
Yes, we have a few questions. First, maybe Juan from Terrassa asking what was the number 10 in your points, Justine? Maybe didn't hear very well. After philanthropy, you said something else.
Yeah, the point 10 was reform in recovery. So not to lose the moment, not to lose the opportunity. So lots of cities asking the question where we can reinvent things that aren't working and rethink where can we address those more systemic issues through this crisis. Let's not just be in emergency mode. Let's try and take a moment to think more longer term and think about the world we want to see post-COVID.
Thanks. And then we have another question from Simon from Birmingham. I think it's linked to what you said about the need of a national recovery package, but I'm not so sure, so maybe it would need some explaining. Simon asked about the finance theme, which is linked to the Core Cities Cultural Investment Inquiry. So he's asking if there would be any other funding streams beside philanthropy. Maybe you could explain what is the Core Cities Cultural Investment Inquiry? I think it's very UK based.
Sorry, I don't understand the question. Is it about different funding models, or
I think it's about the core cities. So maybe if Simon is online, he can explain a little bit and maybe rephrase the question. Simon, are you here?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Hello, Simon. Yes, very well.
Hi, Justine. Seems a bit odd to be speaking to you via the Eurocities platform, but yeah, the Core Cities Cultural Investment Inquiry is the cultural forum of the Core Cities, and it was chaired by the head of Virgin Media at the time, and there were a number of initiatives in that document which looked at cities creating, for example, cultural compacts, but there was a particular focus on finance and delivering new models for finance for cultural organisations, which is even more pertinent now. You mentioned philanthropy, which is a challenge for everybody, but were you also looking at other models, such as use of assets of buildings and land, or bids levy or whatever, as part of the recovery package for cultural organisations?
Yeah, I mean, from the World Cities perspective, I mean, the amount of different kind of financing schemes being put forward is, it kind of runs to a spreadsheet for kind of 3 pages right now. So there's kind of myriad different things happening around the world, I would say, from kind of some different loan systems, different kind of brokering systems. In London, we've got our Creative Land Trust, where we are already piloting social investment for cultural buildings. So I think there's definitely lots of different models, and people are experimenting and trying to just work out how we can get the right resources to people, really. I mean, what we pick up in the UK anyway is that in terms of the financial packages that are often on offer, often our industry finds it difficult to access them, which is a bit of a systemic failure. So we see kind of perceptions in the banking system, for example, that culture is a risky business. So often it's been hard for our industry to draw down financing through the banking system. So to your point, I think there's lots going on, and there's lots that has to, that we have to push back on, and we have to find our way through. And I think this has got to be a moment to really innovate and find some, new models to support our industry. I was at the British Fashion Council this morning, and from a fashion perspective, there's a real, acknowledgement that philanthropy and grants alone won't support businesses. There needs to be different kinds of investment models. So yeah.
So let's keep in mind the need for new partnerships, new funding models. I have a last question, which is more about your personal reflections. What have you learned so far during the crisis in terms of working methods, or in terms of just new ways of working with the sector?
Yeah, what have I learned? I've learned that Zoom is exhausting. Yeah, I've learned that what we've seen, I think, is an amplification of issues that were already there. So, you know, I've talked a lot about grassroots venues, grassroots culture. We already have been working with these small sectors for 4 years and supporting them, but they are very fragile. And, you know, this crisis has really amplified the crisis and amplified the fragility. So that's one thing, and it's also amplified the fragility in the labour market, you know, how fragile freelancers are, artists, etc. So an amplification of already fragile parts of the creative economy, I would say, is number one. I think other things are innovation, you know, this real pivot to digital, bringing with it, of course, lots of challenges, but also the chance to really reach new audiences as well has been good. And then I think the value of culture, you know, I think it's really reminded me of, you know, that culture is a human right. It's a very fundamental thing for us as human beings, you know. This crisis has shown us all how much we need culture. We've all been joining digital choirs and watching videos and, you know, streaming and reading books and, you know, and also it's helped. I think the creative process has helped a lot of people with their mental health in this crisis as well. Painting, drawing, the way it reduced isolation in a way and brought people together. So I think it's kind of also reasserted the core importance of culture as a human right for everyone.
Great, thanks a lot, Justine. We're now moving on to Amsterdam, but I know you can stay with us until 4 Brussels time. If there are questions for London, in any case, Laia will be online with us until the end. So thanks a lot. Araf, are you here with us? Yeah, Araf is a senior policy advisor at the City of Amsterdam in charge of art and culture. Araf, we see you in the list of participants, but
Hi.
we'll give you 1 second to connect. Hello.
Can you hear me?
We do. We don't see you yet.
Great. Can you see me?
Not yet.
Hello?
Hello. Yeah. We hear you. We hear you, yes.
Great.
If you can turn your video on.
I have, but it might be too much data.
No, it's perfect. Yeah. We are right in your music studio.
Exactly. It's not a fake background, it's real.
I also want to start with the same question. What do you miss most in terms of culture during the lockdown?
Personally, or
yes,
from
personally.
Personally. So actually, in Amsterdam and in the Netherlands, we have what is called an intelligent lockdown. Don't quote me on that, but it's basically, to a degree, we can live normal lives, but there are all kinds of limitations. So some of our European friends have full lockdowns where nothing really is permitted. But in the Netherlands, up until now, apart from big manifestations and gatherings, normal life sort of still took place, but we were asked to be at home as much as possible. So, you know, although unfortunately there are almost no cultural activities in the city, we are still connected to city life. So in that sense, we are not all locked up in our homes. But I do miss, you know, the spontaneous ability to just go to a concert whenever I want, or to go to a cinema. You know, Justine and I always use the idea, imagine what a city looks like without culture, and now we are actually experiencing it. And it's quite horrible, to be honest. So hopefully we will never experience this again, but it makes the arguments for promoting and developing culture in our cities even stronger. I have to say, the argument for culture in the city of Amsterdam has never been so strong before. Across the board, all city departments are really acknowledging the value of culture. So, you know, never waste a good crisis. We can now make sure that in the future, culture is really on the top of the agenda.
It's still crazy to have to wait for a real lockdown to realize that, but yes. How is the situation? So everything is still closed, but are there plans for reopening soon?
Yeah, so in the Netherlands and in Amsterdam, there is the situation that no cultural activities are allowed, but cultural organizations are allowed to still do what they call maintenance. So, you know, orchestras are actually allowed to still train. Dancers,
Okay.
we are now receiving applications from organizations asking, can our dancers train again in our studios? And that is actually possible, but of course there are all kinds of health restrictions, and we have the guidance here is that we should live accordance to the 1.5 meter society. 6 feet society. There are different names for it across Europe. So there's a whole framework around that on which society is now being organized. But a week ago, new rules were announced that from this week, libraries are allowed to start lending books again, and they will probably open next week for children's activities. From June 1, theaters and cinemas and concert halls are allowed to open again, but at the moment only for 30 people, which from a business model perspective is of course not really sufficient. On July 1, that is being upgraded to 100 people, but no big manifestations are allowed until September 1. So those are the guidelines at the moment. However, if there is a second wave of infections coming, then everything will be scrapped again. So, you know, it's a very thin line. You're trying to reactivate culture in your city again, but you know that you can't really look ahead much. It's sort of a week by week basis we are now looking at this. Whilst at the same time trying to make sure that we still have cultural organizations next year. Because for some of these cultural institutions, it's really bad, the economic situation.
Yeah, you have been very busy in the last weeks with the development of a specific support scheme for the local cultural and creative sector. Would you like to share a little bit more? And in particular, I think the methodology that you developed is particularly interesting and can be replicated in other cities.
So I will try to stay away from specifics about our cultural funding structure because, you know, the structure in London is really different than Amsterdam. I mean, our governing principles are different, etc. But on a certain level, you can see specific themes or actions you can take which are adaptable. So for everybody to know, last Friday, the city government announced a new we've taken new measures to support culture in our city. We released a 17 million euro budget, 17 million euros, in order to maintain what we call the basic cultural infrastructure of our city. So those are annual funded organizations vital for our cultural life in our city. Those are part of our what we call the plan for the arts, our funding scheme. But I want to take a step back because that 17 million, of course, was not all of a sudden there. We had to take some steps, and we are still taking steps to release even more measures. And it started when the COVID lockdown was announced. Almost right away, we started to do three things: making sure that the shutdown was very responsibly, executed. And we started to make sure that on the one hand, we gathered a lot of info from the cultural sector. So we organized a lot of communication structures around that. And at the same time, we made sure that as a city, we were also very clear in our communications to both the cultural sector and also to our citizens. And last but not least, we made sure that we were fully connected to the cultural networks in the city, but also our partners at the national government from other cities in the Netherlands. So that was very much about positioning and trying to see what is the scope of the crisis we are actually facing. The next thing we did is and I also shared it with WCCF and the London team, is we started to do a damage scan. So we did a very detailed scan of the damage that was made by COVID to all the cultural institutions. And we were able to do that on an individual organization basis, but also on a broader city level. Because ultimately, you need those numbers to make the case for culture when you're trying to secure more funding from either the national government or within your own organization. So for us, that data and that damage analysis was really important. At the same time, we also brought back our killer arguments, as Justine always calls them, which is the killer arguments, the case for culture. So both the social and the economic case for culture, because it felt like 10 years ago when we had our massive budget cuts in the Netherlands on culture, we had to make the case again of why culture is so important for our city and how it benefits our economy, how it benefits the well-being and life of our citizens. But somehow the support and the ears for that case were never better than before. People all of a sudden understood what we were saying. So we've been also positioning ourselves very early on as the capital city of the Netherlands, but also a responsible capital city. So we approached the national government to involve us in their decision or policy making to make sure that on a city level, any measure they were taking would resonate. So we were part of a national task force of the Ministry of Culture. Based on that, we've been very fortunate that our national government, on the one hand, took general economic measures, so work benefits, and also support for individual artists or self-employed professionals in the art sector, which was part of a broader economic scheme. And I think similar schemes are also being presented in many European countries. But next to it, the national government also announced a 300 million euros cultural relief measure. And that has also been focused on cultural institutions, some of them also staying based in Amsterdam. So we were fortunate that we were able to, one, influence that decision making, and on the other hand, benefit from it, because that means we can then focus on making sure that additional institutions in Amsterdam are being saved. And that 17 million euros we released from our city relief budget. So for you to understand, the city of Amsterdam created a 50 million euro general relief budget for the whole city. So for all kinds of sectors. But we were able, it took us 7 weeks, but we were able to secure 17 million of those 50 million euros for culture. So again, we were able to make the case for culture. And we're still not there yet, but this has been a major step. But what we are now doing, so besides of this financial support, we are already looking at reactivating cultural life in our city. So on the one hand, we are trying to facilitate these cultural projects and institutions in our cities of how they can adapt to all the limitations the government has set around that 1.5 meter. It also involves a lot of adjustments in public space, travel, connectivity, mobility, etc. At the same time, with our city marketing agency, we are now trying to develop strategies on the one hand to focus on local visitors for culture. Everybody's dying to get out again. So how can you facilitate that and guide our citizens to the cultural happenings? Our museums have asked, can we open at night? Like literally nighttime museums. So you see cultural institutions starting to look at the 24-hour economy. That means we as a city need to adapt to that as well. But, as Justine mentioned as well, domestic visitors to our city are now a key priority, because we are not, Amsterdam used to have 20 million visitors a year, of which 60% was international. That has basically dropped to 0. Also knowing that all these visitors paid tourist tax, that budget is gone. So we need to make sure that, especially when city budget is also very much based on tourism, that we need to look at new ways of attracting engagement and cultural activity and visitors in our city. And last but not least, we, as Amsterdam, we always work with 4-year budget plans for culture. And of course, COVID has implications for that budget plan, not necessarily the budget itself, but how we are going to make decisions around making sure that the vital cultural infrastructure of Amsterdam is still put in place. So that has been a very short description of all the steps we've taken.
I see in the chat box that some of our members are wondering if the figure is 17 million. Yes, it is 17 million.
17, not 70.
17, yes, they're really impressed. How much for culture? Yeah, that's 17 million for culture. And how much in general? I think you mentioned a global city fund of 15 million.
Yeah, so
right?
There was a general 50 million budget for the whole city, not necessarily for culture, but just generic expenses you make as a city. And our mayor and deputy mayors decided that a portion of that should go to cultural relief funding. At the same time, we've started to make analysis of what actually is being distributed on a national level of funding to cultural organizations, artists, and professionals. And if you calculate all that different sources of support from all these different government sources, then actually I'm really we're humble in the fact that a lot of support is being shown for culture. So that also means that we have to be very strategic we are very strategic towards the national government. And I would assume that Justine is that in London as well, that they are very key in creating general budgets that we need to make sure that culture can adapt to. How can we make sure that the cultural organization is A, aware of these measures, and is B, how can we guide them to apply for all these generic measures? That is definitely a lesson we learned, that as city government, we can help the cultural sector of our city to connect to those general measures.
Okay.
It's not always funding. A lot of times people think that they can only ask us for funding, but they can also ask for advice or expertise or specific guidance. And I think that is a role a lot of our European friends can play as well.
Yeah, that's exactly the rise of non-financial support that is provided by city administration, which is one of the main topics we're trying to focus on in the Eurocities Culture Forum. I give the floor to Cecile because I think we have a couple of more questions for Araf in the chat.
Yes, we had a couple of interesting questions while you were presenting, many on the numbers, actually. So there was one, I think you already repeated the number, the exact number of how much is allocated for culture during the crisis. It was 17 million. But how much money does Amsterdam City allocate for culture every year in normal times? This is a question from Valladolid.
In normal times, it's very normal times. Usually our budget is around 150 million euros, 150.
I think that's clear. And then we had questions on other topic. There was one directed to Justine from London, but I guess it's also valid for Amsterdam. Oli from Oulu asked about the use of new ways to consume and access culture, so mainly through digital mediums. And in your cities, will there be measures continued after the crisis, like streamed broadcast, or do you think this is a risk for people that would not physically participate in culture anymore, or do we need to have a balance between both? Because digital can also be a barrier as well.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Yes. It's a good question. I think that the shift to digital has been accelerated through COVID, The things we're worried about are the things lots of other cities are worried about, which I mentioned a little bit about. So, you know, there's been a feeling that things have moved online as a gift to the nation. So people haven't been monetizing the shift to digital. But for many artists, individuals, you know, we've seen their incomes collapse. So in that shift to digital, we really want them to be paid for their work. Otherwise, it's kind of a double whammy on the crisis faced by artists. I think the other thing that has been raised is access to Wi-Fi, access to online. You know, in London, I think I saw a statistic yesterday which said that of everyone who's living in poverty, about 50% don't have access to Wi-Fi. So we've got to be really careful that we don't ignore the impact of shifting to digital on access to culture. Because so many people just don't have access to Wi-Fi. Yeah, but then I think there's lots of opportunities. You know, I mentioned Fashion Week this morning, London Fashion Week. I mean, in June, normally we'd be gearing up to have a men's Fashion Week. We'd be inviting buyers from around the world to come to London. And that is going to be an entirely digital proposition. And, you know, there's been some debate in the fashion industry about the value of a physical Fashion Week for some time. So this allows us to test out what can be done digitally in that industry. So there's definite, you know, it's definitely a kind of live, interesting area. Before I leave as well, I wanted to, if you don't mind, I just wanted to also mention another collaboration that we've got some good news. I thought it'd be nice to share with colleagues from the European cities. We've just had EU funding confirmed for a phase 2 of our collaboration with 8 different European cities, 750,000 euros, and it's a project all about access to culture for all citizens. And Arif might want to, Arif's leading it, but it was very much also helped along its way by Julie at Eurocities, who helped to facilitate the relationship. So yeah. I think what I'd say is just that this kind of collaboration between cities is more and more important than ever, and we're just really excited to be able to continue that collaboration with our European city colleagues.
Yeah, Justine, you mentioned digital poverty, and I think this URBAC network you're referring to with Amsterdam is really about citizens' engagement, culture linked to social inclusion. Araf, do you want to say a couple of words about it?
Yeah.
Do you feel like audience development engagement will be an increased priority at city level?
I think because of COVID, some of the divides that existed in our city have been even more central in our lives now as well. The digital divide, the social divide, the regional divide, and access has been, we designed access to have a look at how can we make our cities as inclusive as possible when it comes to culture. Now, because of COVID, some areas have been, accelerating digital as well. But we need to make sure that every decision we now take, that idea of inclusion still stands, because it's very easy, of course, now to look at the usual suspects when it comes to a cultural infrastructure, or at the well-known institutions, to make sure that they are still living, or they will still, be there. But at the same time, inclusion should not be something which is only on the agenda when we have an economic, very prosperous time. Inclusion should be at the top of the agenda always. So, on the one hand, access can very much now be of help for us to learn from each other and make sure that after COVID, we as cities are helping each other in still maintaining an inclusive cultural programming in our city. But at the same time, it also gives us even more challenges, and we need to step up when it comes to inclusion in times of COVID. So,
would you say this is really something that is a kind of learning point for you personally in the last few weeks?
I think, of course, when you are in crisis mode, you are very narrow-minded, but you still have to make sure that what did we work on before COVID, what is really relevant at the moment, and inclusion is relevant, and it will always be relevant. So yes, there are economic arguments for culture. Yes, there are social, but you need to take a step up and see, but what is the actual idea of culture in our cities? And it's about bringing people together and learning and sharing experiences from each other. So the crisis itself makes that we have to work even harder than we did before, I would say.
Good. I turn to Cecile because I think we have a couple of questions, and then we will need to move on to next speaker because we really want to ensure that we end up at 4:30.
So we had two other topics that was reached in the chat. One regarding smaller cities. Leah is asking if there are also funding measures reaching out to smaller cities, and then we had a little debate in the chat because some participants think that the crisis will also increase the differences between the small and the big cities. And that it's worth investigating funding also to create resilience in smaller places as well. So do you have any reactions to that? It can be Araf or Justine, doesn't matter, I think.
Shall I start with responding?
Sure.
And then, we also are part of a metropolitan area, which is also including, it's a collective of 32 cities, small and big, around Amsterdam. And what we immediately did when the crisis happened was connect to those cities around us. Okay, what's happening in your city? So we took upon us a role, on the one hand, to share with them our strategies and how we approach it. And secondly, we also used our connections to the national government, all the information we received. We made sure that the cities around us received those as well. So we took a very responsible role in that. And now together with them, I am looking at making sure that those cultural infrastructures around Amsterdam are getting the national support as well. Because it's very easy for us, as a bigger city, where we have a much bigger staff, a cultural team, to look at these issues. So we took upon ourselves to also make sure that we can play a role in helping them as well. Not necessarily with funding, but with information, with expertise, with the professionalism we might have that they can use as well.
I think we were discussing joining forces between cities. I think there are also interesting examples at regional level. Simon from Birmingham, you wanted to say a couple more words about a West Midlands cultural response unit that has been developed at regional level as well.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm going to hand on to my colleague, actually, Erica, and let me just explain the context a bit. We've had Justine on from London, and like London, the new mayoral region for the West Midlands is relatively new. I think it came into being in about 2017. Like London is made of 10 boroughs. Birmingham and West Midlands region, is made up of 7 constituent different local authorities, in which Birmingham and a number of others, such as Coventry, I know Val's on the line from Coventry, who you know, Wolverhampton, Walsall and others are cities within that wider West Midlands district. Erica, my colleague who's joined us, is chair of director, beg your pardon, of an organisation called Culture Central, which is the Birmingham-based or the Birmingham representative cultural member organisations representative. But for her sins, Erica is representing the wider West Midlands cultural region in this what's called Culture Sector COVID-19 Response Unit. So for that introduction, Erica, I'm going to hand over to you to explain about the work of the unit.
Erica, could you just be aware of time running? So just try to be very synthetic in your explanation. Okay, I think we've lost Erika somehow. Erika, are you connected?
Okay.
So if Simon, you want to explain quickly in place of Erika?
I will. Sorry, I didn't realise that she's. The work of the unit is, has a number of strands. It deals with research and impact, rather like Justine was talking about, for the cultural sector of COVID-19. It's looking at strategy and finance for the sector in terms of coming out of recovery or aiding recovery. Communications is a strong element of the cultural sector comeback. There was a great film produced by a local organisation called Comeback, which is about coming back into the after COVID-19 has recovered. It's about support and development for the sector, which is a strand that Birmingham is leading on. So that includes things like legal advice, finance advice, human resources support, as well as any training and development opportunities that are there for the cultural sector at large. And it's about working together across the sector in recovery planning. So there is no magic bullet here, but it has been a very good representation of the sector working together for each other and for the benefit of the recovery coming out of COVID-19. That's all I'll say.
Okay, I think that's a very good example to share. We will do that when we circulate the highlights of this online discussion. So I will be able to share a little bit more if you allow. Cécile, do we have a last question for our speakers?
Yes, we had one question again on the pace and the power of cities joining forces maybe. So I have said that in the Netherlands they are really working together, or actually Amsterdam is using its power as a capital city to help out to other smaller cities. Would you have any other advice for small cities that not necessarily have the strength to deal with the consequences of the crisis in their culture sector?
I think, yeah, I can definitely answer. I would imagine that Justine also has something to say about it, also when it comes to London and the 36 boroughs and working together. For us, it always starts with making sure that these smaller cities are working in such a way that you can connect to each other, that you understand each other. And people sometimes do not realize that we can identify with a smaller city because our city is made up of small towns as well. So don't underestimate that a bigger city is still being, when you engage a bigger city, you can probably expect that they do understand the circumstances. So, we have been, for us, it really starts with the experience, but also making sure that the work the smaller cities are doing is resonating with what we are doing, because then we are able to adapt much better to it, and we can use it when we act towards the national government or to companies or to philanthropists. So make sure that you speak the right language, that you write the same words, that you analyze it in the same way, because then that is also an investment in the long term. If you are able now to start connecting with each other, you can benefit of it when we come out of this crisis again. So I would say that personal but also professional element for us is very important. And secondly, it always also depends, of course, on personal leadership of who we are dealing with. Is that person open to take a bigger role as big city than necessarily their own cities? So it's also, it will probably not always resonate everywhere, but it starts with showing that you're willing to cooperate and to connect.
Okay.
Do you want me to say
yeah.
something? No, I don't mind.
Yes, please.
Yeah, well, I would echo that. I mean, in London, we've been on lots of calls with our colleagues in different cities around the UK. And I think, the more we can all be aligned with our voice and culture, the better. I think on culture, we're always greater than the sum of our parts. And, you know, in the UK, of course, London is a big engine for the creative economy, but it's absolutely interdependent with cities and smaller towns all across the UK. So it's super important that we kind of align and our voices, we've just got more power that way. And then I think I would just echo what Anna said before, actually, about not only alliances with other cities, but also alliances, you know, with colleagues in different departments in your own city. You know, we are keen that culture and the creative economy is positioned right at the heart of our recovery strategy. And, you know, we work a lot with our colleagues in our regeneration departments, in housing, in youth, you know, because relatively speaking, we have a small budget for culture in the culture department. But if we work with other departments to kind of insert culture within their strategies, and that delivers better for culture and the city, and also it unlocks more resources. So I think, to echo what Arif was saying, just deepening of those collaborations with other colleagues and other cities as well at this time.
Yes, cross-sectoral collaboration is also on top of the agenda of our culture forum. So thank you very much. I know you have to
thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, Araf, as well. We are slightly late. See you soon, Justine and Araf. I now want to introduce Maciek Hoffman from DG Education and Culture at the European Commission. Maciek is our key contact point because he works on culture, local and regional development. Maciek, are you with us?
Hello, Julie. Yeah. Hello. Can you
Hello.
Hear me and see me?
Yes, we do. Perfect.
Perfect. Yeah, that's our usual mantra. Okay, amazing. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation and for allowing me to take part in this city dialogue. Yeah, like Julie said, I come from the European Commission perspective, so I guess, you know, my input is going to be slightly different from the discussions, but I'm really looking forward to contributing and telling you about what the EU is doing in relation to COVID-19, and very specifically in relation to cultural sectors.
Yes, I think it would be great if you could give us a little bit of a real overview, but no details of what the Commission is doing at the moment. We heard a lot yesterday about this European Commission communication on tourism, of course. So maybe just an overview, and then going in a little bit more details about culture.
Okay. Also yesterday you might have seen that President von der Leyen was speaking to the European Parliament about this recovery plan for Europe, looking very much into the future multi-annual financial framework, because of course we're at the moment of discussing the future EU budgets. So in this sense, I mean, it's I would say a good start for my chipping into this discussion here. Of course, when you look at what the EU can do to tackle COVID-19 crisis, it's very visible that this is a crisis that encompasses all different domains of our lives, our daily lives, and different sectors, not only culture sectors specifically. And again, if you look at specific tools that are being mobilized at EU level, you find quite a lot of mechanisms that are actually quite, I would say, general in scope, nevertheless very interesting possibly for culture and creative sectors. And I'm going to send you a link in a second with an overview, but one small example I wanted to give here, the Coronavirus Response Investment Initiative. This is something you might have heard about. This is the initiative proposed by the Commission, allowing member states to mobilize unspent cohesion policy funds, around 37 billion euros across Europe. Of course, in line with the logic of cohesion policy, this money is not spent equally in all the regions. So this is, I think, also a bit of an contribution to this discussion earlier about the situation in which smaller cities or less developed regions are. Again, the idea here is that what's happening currently is that member states and managing authorities are reviewing their investment priorities, current operational programs, and the idea is to reorient these funds to really really provide help for sectors affected by the coronavirus crisis. And this is going to be very important for cities to be part of this dialogue. Of course, it's very different from one member state to another, but ultimately these are going to be cities that will be either intermediaries or beneficiaries of these funds. And of course, we hope very much that through Coronavirus Response Investment Initiative, at least some of this cohesion policy money could be mobilized for culture. And then we have quite a few other tools like this, very specifically now looking for cultural and creative sectors. If you take, for instance, Creative Europe program, this is in fact the only EU program as such devoted to culture and creative sectors. What we are trying to do is, of course, first of all, be as flexible as possible with the current program. We look to evaluate as fast as possible also the applications we have ongoing to make sure that the money can reach the sectors quickly. We have also a number of smaller actions for some specific subsectors, such as performing arts or literary translations or cinemas, and try to have a look at it. Of course, what's going to happen now, and Anna Lisa mentioned Culture Heritage in Action. I think this is a good example of one of our actions and important policy work that is going to be, of course, influenced by COVID-19. But we have quite a big list of similar actions together with member states working on very specific topics, and some of them were mentioned here already. For instance, of course, the working conditions of artists and cultural professionals, the questions of reaching out to audiences and understanding digital audiences, the issue of role of culture for social and territorial cohesion. We had quite a lot of different actions planned together with member states on these topics as the European Commission. And of course, COVID-19 is going to make that these actions will have a completely different angle. What's nevertheless, I think, important here is to make sure that it's, and this was also, I think, flagged by previous speakers, that we should make everything we can to exchange what's happening. Also, I'm very happy to always hear about what's happening on the ground in cities and regions in relation to culture and COVID-19. And there's also a big, possibly, contribution from such discussions and from fora and organizations such as Eurocities.
Okay, so what we will keep in mind is that the content of future call for proposals is very likely influenced by the consequence of the crisis. Yeah, if there are there specific lobbying actions that you think could be done by Eurocities, by cities? What would be strategic at the moment?
Yes, maybe on the point of sharing information. So what's been happening actually since the wake of the crisis is this exchange of information practice that we've been doing. On the one hand, with member states, so we have a dedicated online platform, a closed online platform with culture ministries and the European Commission, in which we are discussing with culture ministries counterparts also different matters, sharing information, and then of course now the hot topic is the question of de facto, let's say, exit plans. But I'm of course as let's say a member of that platform very happy to also share. I recently shared, for instance, the very excellent COVID-19 section of Eurocities website. Another such platform is Creatives Unite. You might have also heard about it. It was launched last week. The idea is to have a European platform from cultural sectors and for cultural sectors, really with content provided by cultural sectors and with local and different stakeholders. It's been quite an interesting opportunity also to share what's happening. During the only 1 week following the launch, we had more than 10,000 visits on that platform, and currently more than 200 articles that are shared. So I think this is also a very interesting opportunity to share information on this, let's say, European scale. And then, of course, last but not least, is the question of future budgets and advocating for culture. And this is something that was also mentioned by previous speakers, I think. Like I said, we are in this very decisive moments of deciding on future EU programs, and Creative Europe is really just a drop in the ocean of needs. And this is only one of the programs, but culture heritage, creative sectors can be supported culture through different programs, through, of course, cohesion funds that I already mentioned. And here, this is also very interesting for you. I'm going to also send you this link. Some weeks ago, European Court of Auditors published a report after quite a few months of investigation into how member states, cities, and regions are spending structural funds on culture and cultural sites. And of course, the big, let's say, finding of this report and big finding of the auditors is that there is money, of course, for culture available through these different sources, but there is a need for better coordination, for more sustainable actions, and for really strategic, I would say, investments in culture in this regard. Of course, taking stock of very important social dimension of culture, not only the economic value in here. So I think this is also an interesting, I would say, hook for Eurocities and for many of you. And so I'm going to send you the link to this report and really to keep advocating on your sides with your ministries, with your national representatives to make sure now that culture is included in these different European support tools, but in the long term to make sure that culture is included in future European Union programs, and that we can also continue to and help in the future these sectors that are so much affected nowadays by COVID-19 crisis.
Okay. So what we will do is we will share all the links to the document that you mentioned and the different platforms in the highlight that we will circulate as soon as possible. So our members and our cities can all contribute. I don't see any urgent questions, but if there are questions coming later on, we will send them to you by email so you can respond, taking a little bit more time. Thanks a lot, Maciek. We move on to the last part of the discussion, which are some concluding remarks by Susanna. Susanna Tomila from the city of Espoo is chairing the Eurocities Culture Forum.
Thank you, Julie.
Hello, Susanna.
Hello. I don't know if you can see me.
Okay, we do. To be honest, I expected a very nice and natural Finnish landscape behind you.
Unfortunately, you only have this, my dining room landscape here.
Which is also nice.
Thank you. Okay.
We just want to we want to hear about what you will remember from this discussion and your main highlights.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I of course want to thank all the speakers today and also the Eurocities office that you have arranged this webinar. I think it's very nice to, well, you can't say see everyone, but at least I saw all your names in the participant list, so there's a lot of familiar cities and familiar faces behind the screen somewhere there. So it's really nice to have this many participants here today. I'm really happy about it. And as we have heard today, the concern is real, and both the cities and the Commission are trying to solve the situation and really trying to solve the situation and find ways to find the economic, the way out from the economic crisis for the cultural field. And I thought that Maciek had very good ideas about that, what we just heard. Then I would also encourage everyone to go and see on the website that Eurocities have made about the good cases or practices that the cities have come up with. They are really, really nice. And of course, we heard more today from London and from Amsterdam. Money is one way to solve the situation, but as we also heard, there is a lot of other ways to come out from this crisis for the cultural field. And if I'm trying to conclude what we heard from the Deputy Mayor Simons and Araf Ahmadali today, I think there would be three things that are very important and maybe my main observations today. One is the dialogue and the communication, the communication between the cities, the communication with the citizens and with the cultural field, and also the debates to find mutual learnings from each other. I think that is something that both came up with both speakers, and very strongly they took it in their speeches. The other one is somehow to find and collect data and analyze the data. Araf talked about damage scan, which I liked very much, to collect some kind of data and also capturing the impact of the economics and in everything that is happening now. And I believe that this is maybe something that we need to think about, because this is unfortunately not going to be the last crisis we are going through in Europe and not globally either. So it might be a good idea for us cities to collect this data together somehow, so we maybe can be prepared for the next time better than we are now. And then the third thing that I would like to mention is the argumentation. There was a killer argument, which I liked very much. The arguments for the decision making and building arguments to make the case for culture, as the Deputy Mayor Simon said. I think we all, as cultural workers and cultural directors, we need argumentations, we need words, we need the similar way of talking about culture and how to argument when we make decisions in the cities. So this maybe could be the main observations. Then I also would like to say that there was a lot of discussions about the grassroots culture and the small actors, the artists. They really suffer now, the small ones. But at the same time, I think the big public also sees and notices that they really make a difference. So we need to somehow come up with the point that there is a meaning in recognizing also the small actors now, and see that they really have both an economic meaning, but also for the whole cultural field and to strengthen the vitality in the cities. So these might be the observations for me.
Are there any other information you want to share with Culture Forum members about future activities? Or yeah.
Yes, I would be very happy to say some words. I know that we have been going through the strategical changes, working a lot of planning how to work better with our working groups in the Cultural Forum. We have discussed the renewal, a little bit of how to renew the forum meetings and so. And well, unfortunately, we haven't had the possibility to meet through our working group meetings this spring as it was planned. We had planned in, I think, 4 or 5 more or less study visits or peer learning visits. They, of course, we couldn't arrange them, but there will be arranged 2 virtual meetings. I have to see it from the Culture Services and Culture for Inclusive Cities working group. And there's going to be one on the 28th of May, and the other one in June, discussing about the social value and social impact of culture and the research perspective, and then the implementation, more practical implementation of that. Also, the 2 other working groups, the one which is working with the public art and the other one with the cultural resources and partnerships, they both also will have virtual meetings before our forum meeting, which will take place in Tampere next October, and I hope that we will meet there in real life. But if not, then we will meet in some other way, maybe in this way. But as we have now decided, we're going to arrange the forum meeting in October anyway, and Tampere will host it one way or other. And the subject in Tampere will be culture, health and well-being, which is a very important task now, and we're going to have maybe a deep diving into the subject and maybe widen it up a little bit from from the discussion before of well-being and culture. So I really hope to see as many of you as possible in the real life in Tampere next autumn.
Let's see. The meeting in any case will take place, as you said, in real life in Tampere, Finland, or in some other virtual forms. But we are used now to working this way. We've done online forums on environment last month, for example. So we now have the tools. Of course, it's not the same, but it's also our role as a network to keep going during the crisis. Do you have a final word for your colleagues from the forum?
Well, I just want to wish you a healthy spring, and I hope you keep up the spirit, the good spirit, the positive spirit, and I wish you strength to cope with this situation. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We still have 2 minutes for me to conclude. So first, I would like to say a big thank you to all the speakers, to all of you who registered and took time to be with us, to Cécile for moderating the chat, and to Miguel for responding to your technical questions and issues. And in particular, I would like to say thank you to all the cities that are members of Eurocities, sometimes members of the Eurocities Culture Forum, but for whom it's difficult to travel and to attend our physical meetings. So it was really nice to see them register and see new names. So I would really like to thank you. Just for your information, there were 68 DFs registered to this session, so it's really heartwarming. We will circulate some conclusions and all the links to the papers, the meeting, the online platforms and the figures, of course, that were mentioned during the discussion. Don't forget, if you want to feed in the Eurocities COVID news section, you can all kind of information about new cultural initiative, new cultural services, or new cultural solutions that you are developing in your cities. And if you have any question about Eurocities and about the Culture Forum, you can always send me an email, of course. Thank you very much. It was nice to hear from you all, and see you soon, I hope, in Tampere or somewhere on the internet. Thank you very much. Bye.